Hey guys, Captain Dylan Hubbard here at Hubbard's Marina with a quick update from our recent Gulf of Mexico Fishery Management Council meeting that just happened this past week in Panama City Beach, Florida. There was some big announcements, discussions that might bring us some added season days on some very highly sought after species. So stay tuned, watch the video. You might just be very surprised pleasantly. Also, there were some discussions of course, some negative things that might affect us as well that you want to know as well. So stay tuned here. First things first, the big discussion for us was about our gag grouper. Everybody knows that gag grouper season was cut short kind of suddenly, and very frustratingly found out that that was because of season projections and also some past history and also some catch rates that were kind of randomly sampled and evaluated, and essentially an educated guess was made based on those catch rates and catch history and the shortened season, which causes effort compression, that essentially they were trying to be overly cautious to prevent an overage. It really stunk that season closed so early for that already shortened gag grouper season, but hopefully we avoided any quota overage. The good news will be if we avoided a quota overage, if we met our quota or under our quota, we should have a same or longer season next year. If we met or exceeded the quota, that's going to be a big problem. We won't unfortunately know that until around April of next year. So a lot of people are asking, what is gag grouper season going to look like for 2024? Well, the answer to that is most likely going to open up September 1st, and we're going to know how long it runs based on what the actual landings are for this 2023 season, which again we'll find out probably around January for that January council meeting next year, but definitely by the April council meeting next year, and that'll give us a solid idea of our 2024 gag grouper open and close dates. But again, it'll probably be September 1st. The close date is the question mark based on 2023 landings. There are some discussions around the council table about some added gag grouper management measures, essentially adjusting the size limit, the bag limit, or potentially adding a vessel limit to make it easier for the Southeast Regional Office and the Gulf Council to make sure that there's no quota overages and try to preserve season lengths as much as possible. So one of the discussions was cutting the bag limit by 50%, essentially going from 2 fish to only 1 fish for gag grouper. And that discussion was essentially, we encouraged the council not to move forward with that discussion. I specifically was very opposed to moving the bag limit down by 1 fish. Essentially, that's a 50% cut in bag limit that would only equate to a potential 22% reduction in landings. And then on top of that, it doesn't really necessarily make the season length much longer, if at all. Essentially, it's only a handful of days more of season with a 50% reduction in bag limit. And that little positive bonus is not enough to outweigh the negative bonus or the negative effect of a 50% reduction in bag limit. So we oppose that bag limit reduction. It is still in consideration, but was moved back and not moved forward at this meeting. The other consideration was potentially adding a vessel limit of either 6, 4, or 2 gag grouper per vessel. And we vehemently oppose this because obviously it's somewhat predatory towards multi-passenger charter boats and especially party boats. And then also it's just not really a good thing to look at for smaller boats. If we're opposing a bag limit change, why would we support a vessel limit change? Same reason as the bag limit change, the vessel limit doesn't really positively impact season length enough to make it worth that negative impact. We're talking only maybe 12 to 20 more days of season, and that's really not worth it, especially because in order to see that like 20-day increase in season, you'd have to go to a 2-fish vessel limit. And I don't think anybody wants to talk about a 2-fish vessel limit for gag grouper. It's just not worth it to get a very shortened increase in season length. Also, they talked a lot about a spatial area closure for those gag grouper, meaning they close down certain areas to protect gag grouper potential spawning areas. And while that sounds really great on paper, unfortunately, the issue is enforcement. There's such a lack of enforcement in the Gulf of Mexico already. So all you do with creating more spatial area closures is penalize the good people who are following the rules, and the people who are not following the rules, who are already going into those areas, are going to continue to go in those areas. And unfortunately, without enforcement, it creates a big issue. So we oppose the spatial area closures for gag grouper as well. Now, Amberjack was a little bit different discussion. Right now, they're moving forward on a final measure on Amberjack for setting the recreational season start date for September 1st. We continue to promote and encourage them to do that, and it looked like that moved forward as a final rule. So hopefully that'll be in place for next year. So we'll see Amberjack opening up September 1st in 2024 along with those gag groupers. So we'll have both of those fish in conjunction with one another come September of 2024. Also, there's a commercial trip limit of 7 amberjack. So 7 amberjack, that's cutting the commercial trip limit significantly from 1,000 pounds down to basically 250 pounds. So a huge commercial reduction, along with setting the recreational season to open September 1st for amberjack. Data collection improvements, we were really vocal and adamant at this meeting, trying to push for a new data collections program for our federal for-hire fleet. Well, as most of you guys know who have watched our videos, we talked a lot about the Seafire program. We were really hopeful that would continue on, but unfortunately got shot down. Our whole goal is to stand up a program in which we can ensure a census-based management data collection program to allow for better science and management for our recreational fishery, to allow us to remove scientific and management uncertainty. When you remove or reduce scientific and management uncertainty, guess what happens? You remove the buffers. And the buffers are a huge reason why we have a major reduction in access and season length. For example, our recreational federal for-hire red snapper, we have like a 30% buffer due to science and management uncertainties. So if we're able to reduce or eliminate those buffers, essentially we're gonna increase our season lengths by 30, 40, 50, in some cases 100%. So really over time, it's worth it to continue to explore data collection improvements, not only for improving our fishery science and management, but ultimately improving our fishery access and sustainability of our industry long term. So we're gonna continue to push for and hopefully implement some data collection improvements. Also, we talked a lot about at the council meeting enforcement issues and how there's enforcement area issues. They talked about gag grouper, how some of these spawning areas are only closed for a few months out of the year, and how they are potentially talking about making those closures longer. But if you can't enforce the area closures for the short amount of time that there are, how does making the closure longer really help? And that was a big area of concern for myself, because basically these areas are not seeing an increase in male gags. The big discussion is trying to protect those male gags, but if you close an area and you can't enforce the closure, and the number of male gags is actually decreasing in those areas, even with a closure, how does making the closure longer gonna help? It doesn't make any logical sense. We oppose that as well. Also, the MRE FES pilot project, many of you guys have heard the conversation about MRE FES overestimating private recreational effort from private boats and shore-based angling, anywhere from 30 to 40%. In reality, it's about 32 to 39% specifically in our area, and it's specifically for shore-based effort and private boat-based effort, and those are effort estimations are over by 32 to 39%. So that's a huge problem that they've identified through trying to improve and really try to make our data collection systems better, but they're going to work through this pilot project, and essentially what's going to be happening is, instead of collecting data on a 2-month wave, they're going to increase data specificity by increasing the number of waves. So instead of 2-month waves, it'll be every month, and they're going to significantly improve the data accuracy, or accuracy is a bad word, but basically they're going to do more data collection. So instead of APIS surveys only selecting a few fishermen and a very small and doing a lot of data extrapolation and intonation, they're going to actually increase the number of APIS surveys, which is the Angular Point Intercept Survey or APIS survey. So there'll be more people out there with more of these clipboards at these boat ramps collecting that survey information, which more data is going to mean more robust information and then less of that data extrapolation, which is a good thing, and it's going to hopefully help improve the data collection system that much more. That pilot project is already beginning, and it's going to really ramp up in 2024. It's going to conclude in 2026. So during this pilot project, one of the big discussions at this council meeting was holding off any allocation discussions using that MRE FES data, because that's the data that has that overestimation problem. So basically the conversation was, let's hold off on moving forward on allocation discussions using that data that has questions about it until that pilot project can be completed. And I think that's kind of making logical sense to everybody, right? If we know there's a problem with this data, just because it's ruled BSIA or best scientific information available doesn't mean that we should continue to move forward to use it as a tool to reallocate species. Let's hold off. Let's finish this pilot project. Let's continue to work on improving recreational data before moving forward and using it to discuss allocation changes. On vermilion snapper, the big discussion there was the fact that they did an interim analysis and they were talking about potentially decreasing the catch level because the 3-year indices were not great, and the 5-year actually showed a little bit of a decrease. Luckily, the SSC did not vote to move forward on decreasing the ABC or allowable biological catch. The Refish AP that I'm the chair of, we voted down any movement on vermilion snapper, and the SSC basically couldn't make a decision. So the council actually took the Refish AP's recommendation and did not do any management changes on vermilion snapper. We felt it's a super healthy fishery. There's no reason to mess with it. And luckily, that's the case that happened at the council. Also, lane snapper, there was an interim analysis on lane snapper, and it showed some positive movement in lane snapper, showing them to be healthier, a bigger population, and we very vehemently supported the council moving forward and increasing that catch level. And luckily, we got the job done, and they voted to increase the catch level of lane snapper, which should be going into effect here, hopefully by 2024. It won't help us in 2023, unfortunately, and there's still a potential for that lane snapper quota closure. There's also a mid-water snapper potential quota closure this year as well. But the good news that I talked about at the beginning of this video, there's a potential for our federal for-hire red snapper season to reopen. And there's also a potential for that red grouper season to reopen as well. You guys might remember red grouper closed in July this year. If wave 4 data comes out and it shows a significant level of red grouper allowable catch target left in the water, there is a very strong possibility that we could see that red grouper season reopen in 2023. However, it has to be quota left. So I got some emails out, got some questions out there. Hopefully we'll find out very soon that we're gonna have more days for red grouper in 2023, and there's potential for more red snapper days in 2023. I was asked when we'd wanna see those fish. As the chair of the Refish AP, they asked me on the podium, kind of put me at the spot, wasn't able to really ask anybody. They also asked Captain Ed Walker while he sat at the council table, and we both kind of were like, well, it'd be nice to be able to talk to our fleet, but more notice is better, but we don't have much time before the end of the year. So we both said, hey, we could get trips booked pretty quickly. Give us as much notice as you can, but let's hurry up and open those seasons to give us time to catch them before we get into the holidays. So potentially we're talking like mid-November, maybe seeing some red snapper and red grouper this year, which would be really, really positive, right? So that's a positive news that might potentially come into effect. We're gonna find out more probably in the next week or two. Then finally, yellowtail snapper. We were really pushing for yellowtail snapper amendment to continue forward and to try to fight for as much quota as possible for our Gulf of Mexico anglers as we see more and more yellowtail snapper in a larger average size. But they're kind of holding off moving forward on yellowtail snapper since it's a joint amendment with the South Atlantic Council, and it really depends heavily on MRE FES. So the state of Florida is actually going to interject SURFS data or state refish survey data in lieu of MRE FES and kind of move forward, and we're going to kind of see what that looks like. So it'll be interesting using state data instead of that federal data for our yellowtail snapper refish amendment 55. So stay tuned for more on that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that quick rundown of that 4-day meeting. There are some other things that were discussed obviously, but those were kind of the highlights. If you have any questions, drop a comment below the video. I'll do my best to answer. And don't forget to tune in to our Sunday night shows every Sunday night at 7:30 p.m. where we'll discuss this stuff more, and hopefully we'll see you out here on the water soon. Thanks for watching, and thanks for staying tuned.